What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Bryan Lacey before Oktagon 65. It's the last big card of the year. It's a bit of a barren time for MMA at the moment. You know, there's very little MMA on, but we have a little bit of a shining light here, and you know that Jesus walked to at the end of the year over in the you can steal that one for commentary if you want. Over in the Czech Republic, over in Prague, the O2 Arena. This is some card, Bryan, isn't it? It's a great way to close out the year, isn't it?
You just got me going. I could try and use that line, but my mum is quite religious, so I think she might be a little bit angry that Jesus would pick there to spend his new year. But it's a hell of a card. I mean, it's been a big year for Oktagon, but yeah, finishing 3 title fights and the chance, my friend, of an Irish champion, the first ever Irish champion in Oktagon, which everybody's very excited about.
100%. We'll get into the card in a second. So I'm doing shows at the moment where I'm doing like a UFC year in review, Bellator year in review. If we could get a quick Oktagon year in review from you here, in kind of maybe just a feeling around Oktagon, how big a year it's been. Like from the outside looking in, it feels like the views, the feeling around Oktagon is wow. Like what a year. The massive shows they're putting on, signing guys that we know, producing fighters like, you know, Keita and Paradeiser in the main event that we'll talk about. It really feels, and, you know, even if people aren't maybe, haven't paid attention to every card and every bit of the promotion like they do maybe in the UFC and other places, I feel like it's a good, positive view of Oktagon, which is really hard to get, isn't it? And obviously from the inside, is that the way you've kind of felt as well?
Yeah, for me, like this will be my 4th year with the promotion, and every year I kind of sit and look back at the fights, the fighters, the events. But this one feels like and maybe an overused term, but like a landmark year because lots of big things happen. Obviously, the Tip Sport Game Changer, which will have its finale at the end of this, has been as strong as ever. I thought that was a fantastic year of not just fights, but bringing talent to the organization. That is another thing that's grown. And then the 2 stadium shows. No one else has ever done 2 stadium shows in a year in Europe, not back to back. So the Prague one, which was first, and that was it was special because it was on Czech soil. It was in Prague where the whole thing had started, and there was a whole feeling among the team like that you've climbed a mountain and you sat at the top. And then it was crazy because after that one, and everyone was kind of relieved because there was lots of the behind the scenes stuff going on, and the event was spectacular. It looked amazing. The fights were they delivered as well, and you got a sense with the fighters that they felt it was special. And then we finished that, and it was crazy because I was sat with Martin, who's one of the Czech commentators. He commentates with Andre, and he said, "Yeah, Frankfurt's in like 6 months, and that's twice the size." And then that happened. So for me, it's one of these years where. For the promotion, you can see its growth. You can see it's really established itself in Europe now. It's getting recognized. More and more media sites are following it. More and more fighters are coming to the promotion. But those 2 events in particular, I think, really solidified, in my mind, that we are, you know, at the top in Europe.
Can you just explain to people as well, like the level of fandom and, you know, even maybe where it's broadcast and what it means, I suppose, for the area? Because it feels like, look, it's obviously a very American-centric sport, and you know, always has been, and you know, credit to him, not negative about that. It's just a fact of the matter, I suppose. And now it's leaning towards, you know, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and Qatar, and other places as well, with all the money that's coming in from there. But I suppose, like, someone asked me a question, one of the Q&As I did a few months ago, about, like, you know, the promotions in Europe that have a place, that are producing. And even if we forget about the fighters and we forget about the product for a second, they're producing a business that's viable and going and thriving. And that's something in the American audience, which we see is not always possible. And even some of the biggest and the best behind the UFC, obviously, have struggled badly down through the years. Can you just maybe explain to us, and, you know, maybe this is a chat for another day, and we'll get into the card here in a second, but the level of, you know, obviously you've stepped into it in the last 4 years, but what it what it makes Oktagon special, I suppose, behind the scenes in terms of the fandom and in terms of the production and the broadcasting, I suppose.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, and especially the landscape, we talked about America, that is always the roots. That's where it began, and it's built its heritage, and almost sort of typical look and traditions from that country for sure. Then you jump to the Middle East, and I feel like the Middle East is mainly about money. And again, you might get some of the great fights out there. They're paid to have those sort of cards. But I think the difference with Oktagon is it's naturally grown through its attention to, looking, telling the stories of the fighters, making sure there's engagement with the fans, and educating the fans as well. Not just on the fighters themselves, but also on the sport of MMA, what it can be, what a night at an MMA event could feel like. And I think that's given us a fantastic foundation. It's almost natural to us. Sometimes I have to remind the guys in Oktagon, what we do isn't quite normal compared to the other promotions. Like, we really do care about getting those stories out there. We really do care about letting the personalities of the fighters speak, so that the fans, they're not just coming for Oktagon, but it's like a magnifying glass for these fighters. And it's always my favorite thing. I spoke with Will Flury when he was out in Frankfurt. I've spoken with people like Mark Ducis, who's a German fighter as well, and been on the scene for a long time. And it's always good to get their opinions on what it's like. And the way that the fans are able to interact with us, the way that they respect the sport by the way we portray it and the stories we tell, builds fans for life. And it might be a big term, but it's what makes us different. There are people that, we put that fight card out for Frankfurt, the record-breaking one that we talked about with the Eintracht Stadium. They named 3 fighters on that card, and 45,000 tickets were sold. That's the difference. People are coming to be part of the moment, to be part of the night, because they know we're not going to let them down on that. And I think that's a big difference with Oktagon and a lot of the other promotions. A lot of the other promotions might have the profile and the money behind them, but we stay true to the fighters. We try and portray the sport as best we can, and we make the moments special for the fans. We recognize the amount of money people spend to make it their weekend to come and see a show or to come and follow a fighter. So, on that side, I don't think they miss a beat. And I've been in meetings with Andre Pavel, Petr Filipec, one of the board members, and there's ways you could cut corners and make easier money. There really is. But when they say, and they get an idea, they're not thinking about the bottom line. They're thinking about, how do we make this experience something that people take away and then they talk to their friends about. That is the best form of marketing, when people leave an event feeling fulfilled and excited and wanting to be at the next one. And I've been to other MMA shows, other big ones, and I feel like it misses that. They focus a lot just on promoting a couple of the fights, or, that. And I think that's what's missing. We try and stay true to the fans, stay true to the fighters, and then what you get is what we're delivering now, which is sold out arenas, which no one else is doing in Europe.
And this card is that. You mentioned the 3 title fights, and honestly, we could start off with any of the 3 of them here, because I'm excited about all of them. Let's give them the respect, and let's talk about the main event first. Keita against Ronald Paradeiser. Obviously a rematch. I went back and I watched the first fight last night, and I'll tell you, it's the sort of fight that I'm sure when it happened, people said there will be a rematch of this fight, because it was close. It was a kind of a drag out, like, is this guy going to win? Is that guy going to win fight throughout the whole thing, really? And I tweeted there the other day, and when there was a tweet about this fight or something like that, and I was like, this is one of the best fights that can happen outside of the UFC. And there's been a lot of them this year. I think it's been a good year for the chasing back, and Oktagon obviously leading the way with some of the other promotions as well. But it's been a very good year for that. But this, towards the end of the year, this is a real shining light for what can be produced by the chasing back. When, as you said there, get the fighters, make them stars, but also, having the people behind the scenes to realize this is a really good fighter. This is a really good fighter. Let's put him in there, and when they earn it again, let's put him in there again against each other. Like, Keita is 15-1, like 9 knockouts. Paradeiser has won I think was it 12 of his last 13 fights or something like that?
Yeah, 8-fight win streak now.
8-fight win streak since the fight against Los in Keita. And that fight, it's funny, that fight was in February 2022. He's had 8 fights since. That's an awful lot. There aren't many people in the world who have had that many fights since then, and obviously being part of the tournament helped. This really is like, this is top level stuff, isn't it? This is two guys, one Paradeiser at 27 years of age, Keita at 26 years of age. This is top level stuff. Two guys in their prime who have already been put in there against each other, been put in there against each other again. There's no holding back here, is there, Bryan? This is what we want.
It's what we want, and it's what this tournament was all about. And again, when we did the first season of the Tip Sport Game Changer, which was at welterweight, they brought in a lot of fighters from outside. And again, this year, they brought more fighters to the promotion, but everybody had their eyes on these two. Even at the press conference, they were jabbing at each other. This was way back at the start in February or March when we were just talking about the fights and the potential route. But again, you said it, this is exactly what we want to see. This is how the cream rises to the top. And the fact that they're, and Lozan Keita is 15-1, but that one loss is that leg break from kicking Mate Sanakidze. So he was in pretty much control of that fight until that moment. But Paradeiser has been on a charge, 8-fight win streak for him. And it was John Kavanagh, I think a long time ago, said the best sort of way to test how far you've progressed is a rematch, is looking at a fight and doing it. And again, maybe not in 6 months, but particularly now when you look at this 2 years later, especially with the talent they fought, Keita taking the featherweight belt as well, Roddy Paradeiser rising and finally claiming the lightweight belt, which he didn't have to put on the line for this. He said at the press conference, if I get to the final, I will put my belt on the line as well. The belts freeze during the Tip Sport Game Changer if the champion is part of it. So for him to put it on the line, that means this title fight will be for the Tip Sport Game Changer title, which is, again, winning the tournament throughout the year against some of the best lightweights in Europe, if not the world. 300,000 euros, that is the prize for the fighter. And then also the lightweight belt, and that will move them to pound for pound best fighter in Oktagon as well. So it's massive. And the fact that these two have risen through the challenges they have, because it's not been an easy path to get to this rematch, puts a bit more weight on it. And for me, it's one of these fights where every time I'm looking at it, one morning I wake up and I'm like Keita, next morning I wake up and it's Paradeiser. It is a beautiful statement, not just for the Tip Sport Game Changer, but for Oktagon and the level of fights we are creating now as a promotion.
I remember the last time I watched the fight between the two of them before, obviously their semi-final fights or whatever it was, and I remember thinking to myself, after watching that fight and then watching more recent fights, I was kind of thinking, you can kind of throw out that fight a little bit. These guys have changed and improved an awful lot. But going back watching it, I still believe that, but I also think the reason they weren't as good as they looked recently is because they pushed each other so hard. Like and we see that an awful lot in higher level fights. So, like, watching it back, it's funny because you mentioned there about one day you pick Paradeiser, one day you pick Keita. And I think the reason for that is there's so many adjustments that can be made coming out of that first fight. Like, early in the first round, Paradeiser took him down again and then took the back for most of the round. I thought, the southpaw of Paradeiser caused big problems. And I think that's something, once you face it once, and the same guy, it's maybe easier to face it again if you're Keita. And like he was there to be hit, was Keita, more than any fight I think we've seen him in. But the longer the fight went, it felt like Paradeiser was starting to tire, but tire because of the pace I suppose Keita was putting on him, and the amount of shots he was landing. Even I think at one stage had a bit of a tactical spit out the mouth guard in the fourth round, and like the blood was going. Like it was the end of that fourth round. You're thinking, is he going to come out for the fifth round? And in the fifth round, it's kind of crazy again, and Keita ends up winning it. I wonder what the big adjustments will be. What do you think? Like, if you're to guess what the changes will be for both of them coming into this fight, what would the predictions be? And I'm not talking about the predictions in terms of how the fight will go, but what they will try to implement.
I understand. Yeah. And I think the way, because I've watched that fight again a couple of times since it happened, and this month just before getting ready to prep for for this fight. And I feel like Keita, and let's talk about them as people just before we talking about the actual tactics possibly. But I feel like when Keita like splashed into the octagon world, and it was, you know, his knockout of Rishavi when he first debuted for us, which was phenomenal. From that moment, people always believed he was world class and he would be champion. Ronnie Paradeiser has made people a believer over the last 8 fights, and that for me is a big difference. And I've seen it in him confidence-wise as well. The way he is dealing with people, even Oktagon MMA in that last fight to earn this spot in the final, he has become a devastating striker. He's much cleverer in there, but he's carrying so much more confidence coming into this. And I've been cage side while Keita has watched Paradeiser through some of these fights, with the Andrew Fisher fight, with the Vladimir Sikic fight, and they straight away go to each other. Now, Keita, I feel like his confidence and the way he trains, and the fact that he you know believes that he just has Ronnie's number is going to be a big thing for him. But I think the difference for me is the change in team for Ronnie Paradeiser. So he's now with Ankos MMA in Poland. They've just helped Sardari get to that championship belt there with the knockout of Kaik Brito in our last event, and then just his confidence as a fighter. And I think his striking is much cleaner, which could be a problem for Keita. I think he's learned to use that range advantage, which he has over pretty much every other lightweight that he ever steps into. Considerable height and reach over Keita, and the way he mixes it up as well. So those takedowns, if he can find a way of setting them up and not being readable by Keita, then that will be interesting. But Keita as well, he's just one of these guys that when I watched the Legierski fight, I thought that might be the toughest challenge for him, because Legierski's only lost outside of Octagon, never been beaten inside the cage. But Keita, his striking, his speed is something that is a problem for everybody. And I feel like Ronnie will really have to be, you know, on from round 1 to be able to deal with that, because when you let Keita take the momentum, it's very difficult. Only Sardari since then has almost taken that away from him, but it's very difficult to take it back. So adjustment-wise, I think, I think it's going to be down to just how Ronnie starts that first round. If he lets Keita settle, it's big trouble. But yeah, it's very difficult to bet against Keita in any fight.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you said, like Keita is an avalanche type of fighter. He gets ahead and it just gets worse and worse and worse for you.
And he doesn't tire. It's crazy because he fights at his pace. He puts you on the back foot. And I've seen it with Samuel Bark. You saw it, Jakub Tikota, Nico Samsonidze. He lost that first round with Nico, and then he just put it up a gear. And, you know, one of the most devastating knockouts you'll see inside the cage. But it's the best time for Ronnie Paradeiser to fight him. As in he's looking his best, but we'll see how it goes. It's one of those where every time every time I think about it, I pick a different winner.
Yeah, my take on it would be I'd wonder if Paradeiser will be even more wrestle heavy than the first fight, and if there are adjustments to be made, and there are positive adjustments in terms of positive for Paradeiser, that could be a real game changer. Because how do you take away? Like, it's not only taking away the cardio maybe of Keita, because I don't know if that's even possible because it's so good, but it's maybe even conserving your own. Because if you look at that fight and you think who put out more energy in those first 4 rounds, you would say probably Keita, but who was the more tired? It was Paradeiser. So that's 100%. when you find yourself in that position, it's very, very tough. So
the other thing as well with this tournament, but even Bojan Veličković talked about, he won the welterweight one. He said it's so taxing fighting that often, and particularly if you're doing big weight cuts. Yeah. Now, Bojan wasn't a huge welterweight. Michaelides, I think you saw in that last fight with him, he was cutting a lot of weight. He's now moved to middleweight. Ronnie Paradeiser, I watch him weigh in on the scales in the morning, and he hits that 70.8 limit. And then, 70.3 he'll have to hit for this one, for the championship weight. In the evening, he is, and this is when we're just weighing in for the ceremonial, you know, the stare downs. When he's back on the scale, he is between 10 and 12 kilograms heavier by that day. And to think that he's cut for Korkmaz in March, July he cut for Torres, and then of course with September it was Oktagon MMA. You hope it doesn't become a factor, but cutting that amount of weight every 3 months consistently, on top of putting your body through a car crash of a fight every single time, that is a question for me. He will be the bigger guy by a lot, but it's whether it's to his detriment.
Yeah, I spoke to a few of the PFL guys last year after the tournament, and they were all like, "Never again," that type of thing. So, yeah, it's
Bojan
not easy.
Velickovic, Bojan Velickovic said the same. Like I said, oh, you're looking forward. When are you going to get back in? And that's why we haven't seen him for a while. He got married for sure, but he explained to me just how hard that was on the body, like physically draining. So and I'll be surprised if Ronnie wins this. Even if he doesn't win this, I'd be surprised if we see him stay at welterweight, at lightweight. Sorry.
Uh, let's move on, because I think we could probably spend an hour talking about that fight alone.
That's how good the fight is, Sean. That's why. Come on.
I hope
Come
you.
on.
We're definitely gonna have to extend our 30 minutes here anyway. But anyway, we'll move on. Will Flury against Carlos Vemola. This like. The last time we were talking, or text or something, I remember talking to you, and we were both like, will this fight actually happen? Like, will he do enough to? I think the fights have spoken for themselves. Well, will he do enough to kind of entice Vemola into fighting him? And by God, did he do enough? We've seen the stare downs, we've seen the shit talking. Like, I remember in like the stare down in the, I think it was one in the cage, and Vemola was saying stuff, and Will was like, "I don't care now, I have you," you know, and he was just like, "I did it," and he was absolutely not not hiding at all. Before we get into the fight, I suppose the lead up to this fight, and obviously, like, I'm Irish as well, so maybe a little bit biased, and obviously you're with Oktagon, so maybe we've both been caught up in it more than others. But could you explain to the people who maybe haven't got caught up in it, maybe why they should get caught up in it? Because this has been a fun build up to this fight, hasn't it?
Since Will Flurry signed for Oktagon, it has rejuvenated our light heavyweight division completely. He put out a statement when he signed, which listed off all the names and basically announcing this will be the Will Flurry era, which is one thing to say it, and then to go and back it up is another thing. Beat Didi Skvor with a broken thumb, submitted him in Birmingham, then went on and knocked out Pavel Langer in a clinical fashion, face planted him in front of Vemola. And there's history behind this. Carlos Vemola is basically, the biggest star in the Czech Republic, arguably the biggest star in Oktagon. Love him or hate him, he is unique. He's proven. He's the light heavyweight champion. He's been a middleweight champion before. And there's bad blood between these two. And Will Flurry trained with him years ago. And again, they talked about it briefly. And I was in the room when I sat with Carlos, and I explained to him. I said, do you know, what do you think about Will coming out? And he's mentioned about you training back at London Shoot Fighters, and he genuinely doesn't remember him being in the gym. So that upset Will Flurry. Carlos Vemola kind of leaned into that. Will still bears the grudge for the injury he got off of Vemola for them. But since then, Will Flurry has done everything right in the cage and outside the cage to poke the bear and to make it happen. Because Carlos de Vemola doesn't need to do this fight. He was supposed to fight Pirat Kristovic, which again has history there. Carlos lost to him in a nasty knockout fashion and wanted that one back. They're going up to light heavyweight. But Will Flurry has pushed and proved himself into the spotlight with this. The face-to-face was excellent, back and forth between the two. And it's a massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity for Will Flurry. And for me, Carlos Vemola is as confident as he ever is. I've never seen him not believe in himself. There's no doubt that he believes he can do this job. But with what Will Flurry has done over the last 12 years, it's can you stop the unstoppable force? And we'll find out on December 29th.
Where do you think Vemola is coming into this fight? Because I know you said talking about the Kristovic fight, but there's also like a talk of retirement, and he was kind of like, I'm sitting here and I'm doing the commentary, and I'd say he could probably do it for the next 10 years alongside yourself and the team at Oktagon. And this fight, maybe I'm wrong here, but it felt like this fight came around very quickly. I know he fought back in June, so ring rust and stuff like that won't be a factor. But do you think Vemola is coming into this fight like 100% prepared, both mentally and physically, I suppose? Because there could be questions over that.
Yeah, I mean, the performance against Attila Vey was great. It was in the stadium. It was, exercising the ghost of him getting knocked out by Attila and carrying that weight from Octagon 15 all the way through to June of this year. But that was Attila coming out of retirement from 2 years of, very, very different to Will Flurry and what he's been doing. The interesting factor for me, and again, I always, credit Carlos Vemola with, I've never seen him turn down a fight. I've never seen him back off from any challenge. But the interesting thing for me was the stare down in the cage, the one that you talked about, because Carlos Vemola said, if the fans want it, if Pavel and Andre want it, they can get it. He never said, I want it. Not once has he ever said, I want this fight. And that is an interesting point to be at, because he has talked about retirement. There is talk of Attila and him facing off for a third time, and then him maybe laying those gloves down for good. But it's come on this card. This is a card traditionally he is usually part of. And I just wonder whether, and I'm not putting words in their mouth. I've not had any discussion to the fact of this with Pavel and Andre, but the light heavyweight division has suddenly got a little bit exciting, and I will credit that to Will Flury. And if Carlos Vemola doesn't, if he just relinquishes the belt, it's still the belt, but you didn't take it from the champion. So I don't know whether they felt if he's going to defend it, that's great, and they believe in him. And honestly, they back him every step of the way, Vemola. But if Will Flury takes this belt and becomes the true champion of this division, then there's lots of exciting things that could happen in 2025. And as promoters, again, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but they're always looking 3-4 moves down the line. And I think that gives birth to a whole new era of exciting light heavyweight fights.
100%. Will has also talked about middleweight as well, so there's the chance of a two-way champion. Well, I don't know the size of him now. Maybe heavyweight is more likely. But I think, you said about Will coming in and changing Oktagon. For obviously me here in Irish MMA and knowing Will for years, there's been there's a change in tack from him, I think, over the last couple of fights. Like, I remember I was out for dinner at the when he fought Pavel Langer and my sister's birthday, and I was there watching it on my phone, myself and the brother, and then there was like audible like, oh shit, in the middle of a restaurant. But there was also an oh shit moment in the Daniel Scavor fight, because there was a moment where he just like, fuck it, and just went at Scavor. And Will Flury would not have done that before. And I kind of asked him about it, and I don't know, did he want to maybe say it to me, or did he just kind of like, no, I was always being like that. But I think, like, he's 35 years of age now. He's been through what he's been through, obviously, with the drug testing and the PFL. He was sure he was going to win that $1 million in PFL. I spoke to him many times, and like, this was his plan for a while, and then it all went up in the air. And I feel like in the middle of that Daniel Scavor fight, it could have gone two ways. It could have gone to where he is now, fighting for the title, or he could have been retired after that fight. And I truly believe that, because I've spoken to Will before, and he's the type of guy who's like, if I'm not on the path to championships, I'm not fucking doing it. And that was a big turning point for me. And to double down on that with the Pavel Langer fight, I think that's huge. And just funny, we talk about fighters all the time, and you could probably think of 100 fighters. Like, this guy just needs something to click. He needs to let his hands go or do something. And it's very easy for me or you to say that, fucking sitting here and we're not in there getting the heads bashed off us. But when they actually do it, it's so brilliant to watch as someone from the outside. And I feel like Will has done that. And then you come into this fight, maybe we could talk about the matchup here for a second. Like, Will and Vemola for years, and like, I just talked about Will's changing for a second, but if we just retract that for a second, these are two raw bastards, to steal a phrase from Will Flury himself. They'll push you against the cage, they'll tear you down, they'll submit you, they'll elbow the head off you. They're two very similar guys, and I wonder what the adjustments will be, I suppose, from both of them coming into this, like, and considering, I suppose, Will's new game, where he will go with the hands and try to knock you out and be successful in it, as we've seen recently. I'm fascinated by this fight, because Vemola, especially at the elder years, let's say, of his career, he's a guy maybe not as fast as he once was, but he still carries that power. He still carries the ability to hold you against the fence, take you down, and the submission. Like, his finishing rate must be one of the best in the world. I don't think there's any doubt about that. 29 finishes in his career is a whole lot. I think this could be a real battle for the ages, with blood and sweat and elbows and cuts and everything like that against the cage, like an old school, not your normal fucking hold them against the cage, boring fight. I feel like it could be one of them, and maybe at the start, maybe they'll take a time, maybe they'll take a round and a half to get into it. But by the time the third, fourth round comes, if it does come, I think it could be one of them. That's my big sell now. I think you don't even need the Oktagon sell. But how do you think?
I'm in. Let's promo that. Let's clip it and promo it. But I think you're right, and I think Vemola. One thing that it's you look at his lifestyle, you look at the fact he's got tigers, alligators. He's a celebrity in his own right. He's got a TV show about his family and just the crazy stuff he gets up to. Everybody that I know who trains with him or has trained with him, whether you're in Ankos in Poland or Reinders MMA or any other place, Monster Gym in Prague, everybody says he is the hardest worker in the room. Like, he is, his body, when you see him walking around, you're like, how do you fight? Like, your body looks broken already. But he puts a tremendous amount of hours into actually preparing for battles. And one of the things that I think he believes he will have the advantage on his cardio. His pressure is immense. He's again, also the thing I've talked about with fighters that have fought him is they're surprised at how strong he was, or how strong he is. Ex-bodybuilder, moved into mixed martial arts. He's like a train, and he just keeps on coming. So for me, it's a big moment for Will. O2 Arena, Carlos's backyard. He will undoubtedly have the crowd on him. I think Carlos isn't going to waste any time. I think he's going to try and get this to full engagement at top speed as early as possible to try and take the pace, take the power, take the moment away from Will Flury, wake him up to what's in front of him. For me, it's whether Will Flury can, like he did in the Pavel Langer fight, he was dialed in from the start. That combination that finished him, those punches technically are so good. He is Langer is right on the end of him. He's bouncing on his feet, and it's beautiful to watch. But Carlos Vemola can make it ugly very quick. And like you said, it's not the sort of boring ugly where you're just pushed against the cage. You are going to be eating elbows. There's going to be threats of submissions from every single position if he can get you to the mat. So for me, it's whether Will can keep it standing, whether he can get some of his shots off, whether he can make Carlos pay on the way in. And for me, it's whether Carlos can get hold of Will, show him what he's dealing with, because Will remember that session when he was a wee welterweight stroke middleweight at London Shoot Fighters all those years ago. And you remember how that felt. He did say it was a crazy round. But Vemola is, he's an animal. So, yeah, for me, that's as exciting to see. You are literally letting the technician, as I'll call him, Will Flury, for this fight in against the bull.
I can't wait for it. My prediction here is that Will Flury takes that division. Like and by that I mean he's gonna take Vemola down, get on top of him, and beat him up from on top, like Vemola has done to a lot of guys.
That would be a statement. Because I don't think. Listen, I'm trying to think back to a fight where I've seen that happen to Vemola, and I can't. It's one of those where he's a good top fighter. I mean, I've seen him get knocked out. I've seen him get caught. But for someone to dominate him like that, that would, beating him at his own game would be a massive statement. Yeah. But you mentioned at the start, you said about Will and the difference in him. I think there's been an immense amount of freedom. He went through a lot personally, professionally, with everything that happened, and thinking that $1 million was in, grasping distance, that would be the proof of all the work, all the sacrifice, to then going back and working on the building sites and making ends meet that way while watching his colleagues and other fighters from his gym and the local scene and beyond go from strength to strength. I think that has almost let the chains off of this guy. I think he knows how good he is with the rounds he's getting in. And he sort of doesn't talk specifically about the rounds, but he's got big talent going into SBG that are at his weight class or in and around, coming in either or being permanently there. And he knows how good he is. And I feel like this is his one chance in his mind to prove it to everybody else. So that freedom has unleashed an absolute tsunami of beautiful violence from him. So 100%. It's a big night for him. Big night.
Can't wait. And by the amount of time we spent in those two fights, you can tell how excited we are about it. But the third title fight, This must be a commentator's nightmare. Lucia against Lucy. I'm like, oh Jesus, But I think we'll be going with second names in this one. Very, very interesting. Obviously, I know a lot about Lucia Pudilova. Obviously, been around a long time and training where she trains and all of that. But Svabova, watching her for the first time over the last couple of days, I've been very impressed. She's only 6-0, isn't that correct? But she's very athletic. The way she fights on the feet is so different to the way she fights on the ground. Weirdly, like she's more kind of stiff and slower, but you can see the power she has on the feet. Then it gets to the ground and she just looks so athletic and looks like she's just going to take people apart all the time, but very young in the game, obviously, still against someone like Pudilova, who I think has been taken down before, but is very, very fast on the feet and has power herself. Watching one of her last Oktagon appearance, her bloodied up her opponent with the amount of shots that she landed. This is a very interesting fight. I think this kind of comes down to Pudilova's speed on the feet, and if she can keep it there, versus Svabova, if she can get the fight to the ground and maybe beat her up there, or if she can, unleash that power, I suppose, on the feet. This is an exciting fight and a very, very very good level fight as well, Brian, here for the female belt. Let's put it that way. Yeah,
it's the for the 135 belt, and again, this is classed as the biggest Czech-Slovak female fight that there's ever been there. So, two different eras of fighter. Pudilova, you jump back to the UFC, which went to Czech Republic. She was basically the biggest draw. I know people that were at that event and said the amount of cheers she got, the pop was the biggest in the crowd. Turbulent up and down, and again, this is one of the things Andre Novotny talks openly about with Pudilova, is like, if she could fix some of the stuff outside the cage and get her mind dialed in, she's a beast. She is so hard to beat. She's long, she's rangy, she loves to get in the brawls. You look at that Bolander fight, that really brought the dog out of her in that fight. Svabova, though, has become a superstar from Slovakia. Muay Thai background, multiple-time champion, not just in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Europe, and beyond. Very quiet, nicknamed the Silent Killer. You listen to her interviews, very understated when she speaks, but vicious in the cage. And for me, you picked it out on the feet. Kind of stiffer there from that Muay Thai background, but her evolution on the ground is massive. I think she's got 4 armbar finishes on the ground. The way she works it, the one for me that really stands out is that Rosa Gumina fight. She fought at catchweight. Rosa, a lot more experience than her in mixed martial arts, much bigger, very athletic, very clever fighter in the cage. And she was dominating the fight with the takedowns, the control, but she made sure she got the finish in that 3rd round. And it's a great clash of styles, generations, and I think it's one of those fights that will wake up, hopefully, the rest of Europe to just how good these two ladies are.
100%. A very, very interesting fight. And as I said, comes down to maybe the speed and the feet, maybe the wrestling as well. Let's talk about one or two other fights. Like we've talked about Legierski earlier. We talked about Agi Sardari later. I'll tell you what, for a non-title fight on a show like this, it'd be very hard fought to find a fight as good as this anywhere worldwide. Like since Sardari kind of got into Cage Warriors and I was watching him, he became the champion, I was so impressed with him, and people listen to my old shows will know that. I always thought he'd be the type of guy who'd maybe, go to the UFC and have a good, 10, 15 fight career there. Obviously, he's taking a different pattern. It's, you just mentioned about the Keita fight, to put it up to him in the fashion he did. But he's such a well-rounded guy. And then you look at Legierski, fantastic grappler, great chokes, loads of submission, but then big power in the stand-up as well, with plenty of knockouts, been in there with some very, very good guys as well. This to me is a standout non-title fight, I suppose, in this card. Is it for you as well? I assume it would be.
100%. And again, it's testament to the quality of the fighters that came through that Tip Sport Game Changer tournament. Put this in Europe, anywhere in Europe. It could be a co-main or a main event and any other card in Europe. That's how talented they are. You look at their accolades as well. Legierski was the first ever Octagon champion. His only loss is now to Keita inside the Octagon cage. And Sardari, for me, in and out the cage, a beautiful human, a fantastic martial artist. And you just have to watch that Keita fight. You just have to watch the problems he caused Lozen Keita in that fight to understand just how good he is. So this is the reserve match. So again, if anything happens in the main event, say they don't come through or the weight is missed by a big amount, then they would be bumped up to that. So they still have a chance, and they've got to stay switched on for that. We've seen it before in some of the other rounds when there's been issues with some of the fights or fighters. People who were preparing for one fighter suddenly were facing another the next day. So that is one thing for them, but they both have got a legitimate problem on their hands in each other. And it's a world-class fight, both proven quantities. And I'm excited to see them test themselves here.
Yeah, 100%. Bryan, you've taken up nearly enough of your time now. Just a couple of more of the fights. Jonas Magard against Igor Severino. I'm delighted that Oktagon are giving Severino a chance here, because I might have been the most outspoken person in the world here. Obviously, he's the guy in the UFC who bit his opponent. I felt sorry for the guy. Like, he made a terrible mistake. Look, if they'd giving him a fine and banning him for 6 months or whatever. But like, it felt like this guy's whole life was taken away from him for one error. And like, your man was fine. Like, he was fine the next. I felt so bad, and I'm delighted.
The tattoo would have hurt more. I'm telling 100%. You now, the tattoo he got of it would have hurt more.
100%. But I'm delighted Oktagon are giving him a chance. But Jesus, putting him in there against Jonas Magard is not that much of a not an easy one anyway. But that's a fun fight. Shamrock is on this card as well, isn't he? Oh my God, man.
No, he's not anymore. So he came out with an injury, so I believe it's hamstring. But I'm gutted for that. And he was supposed to take on Bannock. But that Severino fight is great. That is going to be a lot of fun. And again, you talk about that. For me, I was sad for him because he's 21.
Yeah,
the kid's 20. I'm thinking back to when I was 21, and in that world, coming from Brazil, he's been dedicated to this sport since he was like 8 years old. Before he was even allowed to train, he used to watch his brother train on the mats because they wouldn't let him on. And when they finally let him on at the age of 11, he's just been phenomenal, and 8-1 as a pro. But Magard is they've had to bring people in for him now, because that bantamweight division, no one's queuing up to fight Jonas Magard, but they're going to have to at some point if they want to step into that top spot.
Bryan, thank you very much for your time. Everyone tune into Oktagon December 29th. This is a great card, and I know a lot of people are starved for MMA when there's no UFC on and other stuff as well. Well, here you go. Oktagon have you covered this weekend. Bryan, thank you very much. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all the fans out there. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the new year. God bless.